session with the public sector 2014, but will come into effect in February 2022. I am your host, Dr. Terry Carroll Reid. It is a pleasure to serve you as such for today's proceedings. Now, before we dive right in, for the members of the visually impaired community or the blind community, I am 5'9", by 5'9.5". I'm holding on to the half, and when I wear my heels, I am about 6 feet 1 or 2 inches. The complexion, I am chocolate. I'm very proud of my chocolate skin. My hair is dark brown, pulled back in a nice sleek bun. I'm wearing a black shirt that says "Inclusion Matters," and I have paired it with a white jacket and a white skirt with black shoes with sequins because I wanted to look very good for you guys. Thank you so very much for being here. And for members of the hearing impaired community or the deaf community, we say hello, welcome, good morning. It is so good to have you. Thank you for being here. It is certainly something that we've been waiting on for a very long time, and we cannot wait to hear more about the Disabilities Act. We speak a lot about our Jamaican citizens. We speak about infrastructure. We speak about economy. We speak about progress. We speak about growth. It cannot take place without inclusion, which means that we have to cater to and we have to consider all of our citizens who have various kinds of disabilities, whether they were born with it, whether it is that they had an accident or an incident that has now led them to be a person living with disabilities, or perhaps we're just aging and therefore we rely on certain things. It's a very important conversation. I certainly hope that you will spread this kind of conversation with your network so that we can continue to educate and inform the rest of society. At this time, I would like to welcome Mrs. Dion Jennings, Chief Technical Director, who is assigned to the Jcpd, to kindly bring the welcome. Please make her welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your welcome.
You're welcome.
Madam Moderator, Terry Carroll Reid, representatives from the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, and other representatives from the public sector, senior management team in particular, and representatives from the media. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to those in studio, and welcome to those who are online. This morning we're gathered here to have this sensitization session for the public sector to ensure that we promote the inclusion agenda. So on behalf of the Minister of Labour and Social Security, the Honourable Carl Samuda, the Minister of State, Honourable Xavier Main, the Permanent Secretary, Colette Roberts-Risden, I welcome you this morning and I greet you well as they send their greetings. Disabilities Awareness Week and Sensitization is an ongoing program of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. And for the entire week, as we celebrate Disabilities Awareness Week, we have been fully engaged in various activities involving some of our key partners, including our church service, the church, train of trainers for persons with disabilities and other key sector stakeholders, groups, sessions with the disability sector partners with their boards and executives, webinars with the private sector organization of Jamaica. And today, we are culminating the activities of Disabilities Awareness Week with this sensitization session for the public sector. And what a way to culminate it, because members of the public sector play a very critical role in providing policy, guidance, programs, and services to all, in particular to persons with disabilities. So as we observe International Day for Persons with Disabilities, not only internationally, but locally, we are seeking to promote the rights and well-being of persons with disabilities in all spheres of society and development, and to increase awareness of the situation of persons with disabilities in every aspect of the political, social, economic, and cultural life. Today, as we celebrate International Day for Persons with Disabilities, we are in this space together. We're in this space to ensure that all participants, those here and online, your presence will signal your commitment to ensure the successful integration of persons with disabilities in the society and, moreover, in the workplace. Persons with disabilities face discrimination and barriers that restrict them from participating fully in the society on an equal basis with others. They're commonly denied their rights to be included in the general school system, the workplace, to live independently in the community, to access housing, premises, even political office, to participate in sport and cultural activities, and to enjoy social protection and to access justice, healthcare, and health facilities. And we could go on. But the Disabilities Act provides the foundation for sustainable and transformative development on disability inclusion through all the pillars and areas of the work of the society. And this is enabled not only through the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, but also the Sustainable Development Goals, as we seek to deliver the mantra of leaving no one behind. And so this morning, we are inviting you to catch a vision, the vision of the 2030 National Development Sector Plan for Persons with Disabilities, which is a society that is inclusive, accessible, provides opportunities for all, and recognizes the rights, freedoms, and responsibilities of persons with disabilities in the process of nation building. So this session aims to raise the awareness, consciousness, and understanding and recognition of persons with disabilities, highlighting their human rights. We will ensure that participants are equipped with knowledge and information that will provide guidance on the rights of persons with disabilities, as well as to ensure that we mainstream disabilities right across the public sector, including in the workplace. It will enable you to facilitate and align your policies, your programs, your plans, and to ensure that your projects are also highlighting the inclusion agenda. So this morning we welcome you, and we look forward to your full participation as we seek to heighten the awareness of your roles and responsibilities under the Disabilities Act, and to ensure that we promote and protect the fundamental rights of persons with disabilities, not only in the public sector, but in the society. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Dion Jennings, Chief Technical Director, thank you so very much. That was such a comprehensive welcome, and it reminds us that we all have our part to play, and certainly there is information available, but you also owe it to yourself and to your community to go in search of that information and to assimilate. This is not a talk shop. We're not here to talk and present and then we go about our business. We're actually here to implement, to assimilate, and to ensure that persons living with disabilities in Jamaica, they're actually benefiting. This is not performative by any stretch of the imagination. Thank you for reminding us. A lot of us tend to mention the lines in Vision 2030 that talks about the place for people to come, work, play, and have families. But this is the only time I've ever heard someone actually pull out the part of Vision 30 that actually speaks to citizens living with disabilities. And again, it is a society that is inclusive, accessible, provides opportunities for all, and recognizes the rights, freedoms, and responsibilities of persons with disabilities in the process of nation building. Thank you so very much for that. At this time, I'd like to welcome someone who definitely is no stranger when it comes to human rights and the protection and the promotion of human rights. I am referring to Mariko Kagoshima, Unicef Jamaica Country Representative. Welcome. Yokoso, welcome, Mariko. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Mariko?
Hello?
Hi, how are you? I'm not too certain if you heard
Am I
me
just
earlier.
going to start speaking?
Absolutely. We've welcomed you. Go right ahead, Mariko.
Okay, can I go ahead?
Go right ahead.
Okay, Master of Ceremonies, Honorable Minister Carl Samuda, Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Dr. Christine Hendricks, Executive Director, Jcpd, Mrs. Dion Jennings, Chief Technical Director, Ministry of Labor and Social Security, sector partners, colleagues, and members of the media, good morning.
Good morning.
On behalf of Unicef, we congratulate the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, Jcpd, and its partners on this week of timely engagement as you celebrate Disability Awareness Week 2021 under the theme, Not All Disabilities Are Visible. We commend the government for its continued efforts to improve the legislative and operational infrastructure that will improve the quality of life for persons with disabilities in Jamaica. Let me give you some of the key achievements of the collaboration between Unicef Jamaica and the Jcpd, which highlights our prioritization of children with disabilities. In 2017, the Jamaica Council of Persons with Disability, UNICEF, and Digicel Foundation partnered to strengthen the inclusion of persons with disabilities and published a situation analysis of persons with disabilities. Under the partnership, we bolstered registration of children with disabilities to improve their access to social services, support efforts geared towards the full implementation of the Disabilities Act 2014, coordinate and executed a media campaign on the rights of persons with disabilities, and conduct research on barriers to access education and skill training. UNICEF also supported close to 3,000 families with the emergency top-up cash transfer right after the COVID-19 pandemic hit Jamaica. One of the key priority groups UNICEF focused was the families with children with disabilities. This was done in collaboration with Ministry of Labor and Social Security and its PATH program. Minister Samuda has played a vital role to make this happen, so I really congratulate his support, and then I thank you. This year, we also supported the Council and the MLSS to execute timely research on social protection for children with disabilities, examining the socio-economic impact of disability on children and their access to safety nets in Jamaica. Among the key findings include approximately 70% of respondents had never received any financial support from the existing structure designed to support persons with disabilities. Most persons in the study spent between 30,000 to 50,000 Jamaican dollars monthly to care for the children with disabilities. Most of the monthly cost to care for the children with disabilities was for food and the purchase of diapers, with transportation being cited as the second most expensive cost on a monthly basis. In fact, 64% reported that half or nearly all of their household income goes towards caring for the children with disabilities. 69% of respondents reported that it was either difficult or very difficult to access services from the government. Those are critical findings. We all had an idea that families with children with disabilities are facing difficulties, issues, and challenges. But this research confirmed that ideas that we had and has given the evidence with hard data. Mindful of these findings, we are committed to working with the government through the Ministry of Labor and Social Security to improve the quality, efficiency, and effectiveness of services and infrastructure in service to persons with disabilities, and in particular, children. To this end, we look forward to our work in coming months and will contribute to further strengthening the JCPD's management information system and the modernization of social protection system with resources provided under the UN SDG Small Island Development States grant funding. Thank you so much, and I wish you a great session today.
Thank you so very much, Mariko Kagoshima, Unicef Jamaica country representative. It's always good to hear when Mariko has to speak, because she always comes with things that they've done. They've always said the initiatives that they are set out to do, and they always actually come back with what they were able to accomplish. And it's always so nice to have you as a partner and as a support, certainly reminding us that persons living with disabilities are amongst the most vulnerable, which means that they have less access to services like health or even education. They are less likely to be hired, more likely to be assaulted, and of course, less likely to receive financial support. Even if they are the best entrepreneurs with the best business plan, they are more likely or most likely to be turned down. And that feeds into the whole narrative of them not being great contributors, but it's because we're not actually helping them to be a part of the sustainable cycle that they can be a part of. So thank you so very much. So in case you're like, well, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, maybe you're hearing about this for the very first time, or this entity. It is currently a department that falls under the purview of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, which is tasked with the responsibility of providing and administering social services to persons with disabilities and promoting the rights of persons with disabilities and facilitating their independence and inclusion in every area of life that is promoted. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Vando Palmer, Director of Communications and PR in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, who will deliver a message on behalf of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Every area of life. Please make him welcome. Palmer, Director of Communications and PR in the Ministry of...
My fellow Jamaicans, once again, we pause to recognize a very special group of persons in our society, a group that has been marginalized, discriminated against, and a group that quite rightly clamors for inclusivity. I refer to persons with disabilities. By now, many of you are aware that Disabilities Week 2021 began on Sunday, November 28, and goes through to Friday, December 3. During this period, a series of planned activities across the island highlight the importance and the value of this group of persons among us. This year's theme, Not All Disabilities Are Visible, is significant, as it places emphasis on disabilities that are not immediately identifiable, but nevertheless have an impact on people's lives. Some of these disabilities include mental illness, learning problems, chronic pain, and vision or hearing impairments. According to the World Health Organization, more than 1 billion people, or 15% of the world's population, have some sort of disability. And despite the growing number of people with disabilities continue to have poorer health, lower educational achievement, less economic opportunities, and higher poverty rates than individuals without disabilities. This is due to the lack of resources and the numerous obstacles that confront them on a daily basis. When I was appointed Minister of Labor and Social Security, I promised that during the first year, the legislative agenda was going to be my priority. The Disabilities Act was passed in 2014, but the regulations to give effect to the Act languished for almost 7 years. As we commemorate Disabilities Week 2021, I am extremely proud to declare today, promise made, promise kept. This is definitely a priority for the government, despite views to the contrary that are held in some quarters. This government is seized with a moral imperative to act with dispatch to improve the welfare of persons with disabilities. We will not resile from this position because we care. We know that discrimination against persons with disabilities in Jamaica is overt if we are to go strictly by the data relating to employment and even higher education. But thank God, the Disabilities Act of 2014, effective February 14, 2022, will make acts of discrimination illegal as we establish basic standards for engaging persons with disabilities. The new Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities will be the government's arm to ensure adherence to the law and its provisions. I am anticipating that the new and very pivotal role of the Jcpd will allow it to be vigilant as it intensifies its effort to help protect the rights of persons with disabilities. The ministry is far advanced in engaging the services of a consulting firm to help us to roll out a very comprehensive public awareness campaign in the shortest possible time. Ladies and gentlemen, it will take constant dialogue with members of the community of persons with disabilities for things to change socially and economically for them. We have made considerable progress as a country, but we still have a long way to go. The Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities continues to actively promote the rights, independence, and inclusion of persons with disabilities. We believe that if persons with disabilities are given equal opportunities, their capacity to develop into productive, self-sufficient citizens, contributing meaningfully to national development, will be greatly enhanced. The government continues to enact all the necessary legislations and regulations to ensure that persons with disabilities can perform at their best in their workplaces and communities. So far, we have completed 3 codes of practices. The Code of Practice for Employment, for example, was created to serve as a guide for companies in ensuring that persons with disabilities are not discriminated against in the workplace. There is also the Code of Practice for Education and Training, and the Code of Practice for Health Care and Health Facilities. In addition to those, we are currently working on the Code of Practice for Public Passenger Vehicles to ensure that persons with disabilities have better access to transportation. Several critical issues are now being addressed in order to complete the regulation. The creation of the Disabilities Tribunal, the restructuring of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, the completion of codes of practices, the preparation of the confidential register, and consultation with stakeholders to assist in the formation of the policy that informs the disabilities regulation are just a few of the initiatives. Thanks to the team at the Jcpd and our valued stakeholders for the outstanding job they have done to get us to this point. The Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities has in excess of 36,000 applicants, but just over 13,000 on its register. I am therefore appealing to you to make every effort to get registered so that you can avail yourselves of the many services and benefits to be derived. I wish you a happy International Day of Persons with Disabilities.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Mr. Bando Palmer, Director of Communications and PR in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, of course, delivering a message on behalf of the Minister. Thank you so very much for that. And I just want to also bring it to our attention because we're all learning in the space, right? You will realize that we're not saying, we're not calling people handicap. We're not labeling them as handicaps. We are not saying disabled persons. We're saying persons living with disabilities. There's a reason why our language is intentional. And it is very difficult sometimes to unlearn, but if we're going to be a part of this progressive society, there are things that we will have to unlearn, things that were normalized in our society and our culture that it just felt right. We have to unlearn them. So as you go out and you are speaking to your friends and your families about persons, please use terms that will highlight their dignity. Persons living with disabilities. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of husband and wife team, Stephanie and Hugh and Spencer, who are our translators, our interpreters there on the screen. Thank you so very much for your time and your talent. But there's something that Mr. Palmer said that was so important, and I really wanted to burst out in applaud, and it is illegal. It will now be illegal when this comes into effect. Companies will no longer have an excuse not to hire persons who are living with disabilities. So if you're going to upgrade your technology, go and get assistive technology while you're at it. If you're renovating your spaces and you want to go up high and you want to have all these fancy buildings, ensure that your walkways, ensure that your ramps, ensure that even the pavement is actually conducive to persons who may need to use a cane or may need to use a wheelchair. We're asking you to be more conscious. Now, we couldn't possibly be celebrating International Day for Persons with Disabilities, and we're also celebrating the fact that the Disabilities Act will come into effect February 22, 2022, and not have items on the program where we actually highlight the very talented members of the community. At this time, I'd like to welcome Miss Gritly Williams, who is visually impaired, who is a part of the Jcpd. I understand she's a receptionist, sometimes a telephone operator. I hear she's so versatile that she can fit into any role you ask her to. Very pleasant. Met her earlier. Started singing when she's a teen. Put your hands together for Miss Gritly Williams.
Sometimes it's hard, but trying you make it. Believe you me. In order to achieve, go forth and take it. Set yourself free. With obstacles in your way, you may fall before you rise. But if you really want good, you know if you run. So get up and keep your eyes on the prize and strive. Step up in life and go forward, you know. You've got to strive. Remove the doubt from out your mind and let good flow. With obstacles in your way, you may fall before you rise. But if you really want good, you know if you run. Say, get up and keep eyes on the prize. And as part of the plan, you feel have ambition. The Almighty One as your foundation. Hey, nobody get rich and sweet. It's definitely wrong. Don't forget your friends are where you come from. If you a thief, remember God not sleep. Although you rob a man and you get till last week, you palaver out the street, you're beating going steep. Cause God the silent river and we know it run deep. Throughout history, lots of great men and women went about things the old-fashioned way. They just kept on winning and winning and strive. Step up in life and go forward, you know. You've got to strive. Remove the doubt from out your mind and let good flow. Don't be moved by smart remarks from people who think they're witty. Keep moving on, man, gotta be strong and don't indulge in self-pity, but strive. Step up in life and go forward, you know. You've got to strive. Remove out your mind and let good flow. You've got to strive.
Put your hands in. No, man, I know we're small in number, but we can do a better job than that. Come now, man. Thank you so very much, Miss Gritley Williams. Such a fantastic song, Strive. We could not have asked for a better song, right? And I want to take the opportunity to acknowledge, because some of our viewers might have heard a guitarist and go, you know, what's going on? We actually have Sir Robert Lawson, who is here, who just decided to jump on with his guitar. We thank him so very much. We love the collaborative effort, and there's something that I've always said about the community of persons with disabilities, and it is that the camaraderie. You cannot meet people who are nicer and kinder. Thank you very much, Miss Williams. That's what you get for singing on the job. When you sing in front of people and they find out that you can sing, all of a sudden you're singing at programs. Thank you so very much for that. We truly appreciate that. So we now move to our very first presentation, because a part of this sensitization is for you to really walk away understanding a lot more of what this conversation is about and what are the benefits and how do we become a part of it. At this time, I'd like to invite Mrs. Janetta Smikle, Senior Legal Officer, Ministry of Labour and Social Security, who will be doing a presentation on the Disabilities Act 2014, charting the course to equality of treatment for persons with disabilities. Please make her welcome.
Thank you for having me. Good morning,
Good
moderator.
morning.
Good morning, public servants. Good morning, persons who are listening online, who have joined us online. Thanks for having us today. So our presentation this morning is on the Disabilities Act 2014, charting the course to equality of treatment for persons with disabilities. The Disabilities Act was passed in Parliament and it received the Governor General's assent on October 31, 2014. This legislation seeks to promote, protect, and enhance the full and equal enjoyment of persons with disabilities, of privileges, interests, benefits, and treatment on an equal basis with other persons in the society. The purpose of this presentation today is to examine some of the main provisions of the Act. It is imperative that all parties understand their rights and responsibilities under the Act. So we will set the stage with a background to the enactment of the Act. Then we look at the objective of the Act, a few terms that is defined in the Act, the legal establishment of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities and its function. Now, earlier today you heard the term Jamaica Council for Persons with Disability being used, but that is a department of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. The Jamaica Council for Persons with Disability that I will be speaking about today is a body corporate that is established under the Disabilities Act. We'll also look at the Board of Management of the Jcpd, the Disabilities Rights Tribunal, protection from discrimination, access to education, employment, among other things. So let's go to the background. The process to enact the Disabilities Act had its genesis in the establishment of a national policy for persons with a disability in 2000. The policy was adopted in keeping with the United Nations Standard Rules for the equalization of opportunities for persons with disabilities. The overall goal of the policy included improvement of the status and condition of persons with disabilities so they can enjoy a better quality of life in areas such as education, employment, health, housing, transportation, and accessibility to all areas of society. The policy was debated and approved by the House of Representatives in September 2000, and in January 2001, the Senate, in a resolution, placed on records its support for the policy. However, it was recognized the legislation needed to give teeth to the policy, and this recognition resulted in the enactment of the Disabilities Act that we will be examining today. So what is the objective of the Act? It is set out in Section 3 and are as follows: to reinforce and promote recognition and acceptance within Jamaica of the principle that a person with a disability has the same fundamental rights as any other person in Jamaica. 2, promote individual dignity and autonomy, including the freedom of choice and independence of a person with a disability. Ensure full and effective participation and inclusion in the society for persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others. Prevent or prohibit discrimination against a person with disability. Promote respect for differences and acceptance of persons with a disability as part of human diversity and humanity. Some key terms. Access was used in the legislation, and in relation to premises, it includes freedom to enter in, approach, communicate with, make use of, or maneuver within any premises. The term also includes access to benefits and communication in relation to the capacity to receive and make use of information. The term caregiver is also used in the Act. It refers to a parent, legal guardian, or any other person responsible for caring for the health, financial, physical security, and general well-being of a person with a disability. Discrimination, and we hear that term used a lot, and it is defined by the legislation as any distinction, exclusion, or restriction on the basis of disability, which has the purpose or effect of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on an equal basis with others of privileges, legal interests, rights, benefits, and treatment in political, economic, social, cultural, religious, educational, or any other field, and includes all forms of discrimination, including denial of reasonable arrangements. Disproportionate or undue influence is another term, which includes 1, the nature of the benefit likely to accrue to, or the detriment likely to be suffered by any person concerned, the effect of the disability on a person concerned, the financial circumstances of the person concerned who is claiming disproportionate and undue burden, the estimated amount of expenditure or other allocation of resources required by the person concerned who is claiming disproportionate or undue burden, and whether it is reasonably proportionate to the benefit of persons with disabilities. And the moderator used that term to indicate that that is the term that is to be utilized addressing or vulnerable persons. And it includes as a long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment, which may hinder his full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with other persons. Reasonable arrangements. It refers to the necessary and appropriate modification and adjustments which are needed in a particular case to ensure to a person with a disability the enjoyment or exercise of on an equal basis with others of privileges, interests, benefits, and treatment. This includes the provision of auxiliary aids and services such as hearing devices, wheelchairs, prosthetic appliances, computer software, and the use of interpreters and taped audiovisual recorded texts. We're looking now at the legal establishment of Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. It is to be established as a body corporate to which Section 28 of the Interpretation Act applies. And it sets out its function. So as a body corporate, the Jcpd will acquire its own legal personality. It will have a life of its own. So the Jcpd will be able to sue and be sued in its own name, enter into contracts in its corporate name, or as any individual would, have a seal and change it at its will, and hold real estate in its own name. It will regulate its own procedure and business, employ its staff necessary to perform its function. The Jcpd as a body corporate would be subject to the provisions of the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act, and you'll understand why. It is a statutory body. So even though it regulates its own functions, it is still accountable to the people of Jamaica. And I'm calling that act for short PBMA Act. It defines a statutory body as a body corporate established by an act of Parliament over which the government or an agency of the government exercises control. So as a body corporate, which is subject to the provisions of the PBMA Act, the Jcpd then will be required to prepare and keep proper accounts and annual reports which should be audited. The annual reports are to be submitted by the Jcpd, that's the body corporate, to the Minister of Labour within 4 months after the end of each financial year. And the minister is to transmit a copy of the report to and the annual statement of accounts to the Auditor General. It is also to refrain from exercising any body powers without prior approval of the Minister of Finance, and to refrain from negotiating to borrow money without approval. So let us look at the functions of the Jcpd. It is to advise the minister on matters pertaining to persons with disabilities, including effective measures for the prevention of circumstances which cause a disability in person. Advise the minister on current trends, policies and programs concerning disabilities and development internationally, conduct public education programs about the Act, prepare codes of practice for guidance on matters under the Act. And you heard earlier Mr. Palmer, in delivering the minister's welcome, indicated that there are certain codes of practice that have been developed, and those codes really are to be adopted by the Jcpd when it is implemented, and it will be used to provide guidance as to how persons are to behave to prevent acts of discrimination. The Jcpd are to keep those codes under review and to make alterations as needed. Each code of practice is to be laid in the House of Parliament for it to have that legal effect. So, also another function, on its own initiative or upon the request of the minister, the Jcpd is to make recommendations regarding the enforcement of the Act and other national measures for the avoidance of discrimination against persons with disabilities. Advocate for policies and programs of the government to have due regard to the interest of persons with disabilities. The council is also make recommendation or give advice to any minister in relation to any aspect of this Act or to any government agency as it relates to the application of this Act or any other law relating to persons with disabilities. It is to undertake or arrange for or support, whether financially or otherwise, research for the provisions of advice or information. It is to impose charges for facilities or services made available for it or any purpose with the approval of the minister. Arrange for authorized persons to enter any premises other than a dwelling house at any reasonable time for the purpose of carrying out an inspection or inquire for ensuring compliance. The council is required to consult with the community of persons with disabilities. That's very important. And other critical stakeholders when carrying out its function. And it is also required to maintain a confidential register with particulars of persons with disabilities. It may conduct formal investigation for any purpose connected with the performance of its function. The Jcpd is required to conduct formal investigation if directed by the minister to do so. I just have a little, please note here, that they're basically indicating that the schedule to the Act addresses issues relating to the Jcpd, including administration and finance, appointment of officers and other employees, funds and resources of council, accounts and audit and annual report. So the Act basically covers everything the Jcpd is supposed to do. Let's look at the Board of Management. The Board of Management is responsible for determining the policy and general administration of the affairs of the Jcpd. The constitution of the board, it is set out in the schedule, but it is constituted of not less than 17 members. A majority of the members are to be persons who are members of or representatives of the following groups: the deaf, the blind and visually impaired, the physically disabled, the intellectual disabled. The Disabilities Rights Tribunal. This is a body to be established, and the tribunal is to hear complaints of aggrieved persons and to settle the complaints. It is to consist of a chairman and a deputy chairman appointed by the Minister of Labor after consultation with stakeholders, and they should be an attorney at law or should be attorneys at law with at least 7 years experience. The minister is also required to appoint not less than 2 members of the tribunal from a panel supplied to him by organizations appearing to represent the disabled community. And these persons should possess sufficient knowledge of disability issues. At least one of the members should be a person with knowledge or experience in quantity surveying, building or construction, economics, finance, accounting, and human resource. The tribunal will sit in divisions to hear the complaints, and it will consist of a chairman or a deputy chairman and 2 other members. So after considering a complaint, the tribunal may make such orders as it thinks fit. And some of these can be taken by, some of the steps that can be taken by the Disabilities Rights Tribunal after hearing the complaints are issuing a declaration as to the rights of the respective parties, making an order for compensation to be paid to the complainant, order the respondent to take such action as appears to be reasonable for the purpose of removing or reducing the adverse effect on the complainant on any matter relating to the complaint. Encourage the parties to settle the matter by negotiation or conciliation. And if the parties agree, the matter will be referred to the Jcpd for arrangements to be made for alternative dispute resolution. So persons with disabilities can decide that they do not want to go to the tribunal. They want to settle by alternative dispute resolution. And one such organization that comes to mind is the Dispute Resolutions Foundation. The tribunal also has the authority to issue an interim order at any time after the matter is referred to it by the Jcpd. The tribunal may order that the action being complained of cease or be reversed or not be carried out from the time it specifies. So the complaint, or rather the order that the tribunal makes in relation to the complaint, is final and conclusive and can only be challenged on a point of law in the Supreme Court. And the tribunal may apply to the Supreme Court where an individual or body corporate fails to comply with its order. The court may order an offending party who is an individual to pay penalty not exceeding $1 million. So if the tribunal makes an order, you cannot just disregard the order because there's another resolution. The DRT can apply to the Supreme Court, and the court may basically impose a fine, a penalty on the offending party. An offending party who is a company or a body corporate can be ordered to pay a penalty not exceeding $5 million. So what are the areas of protection and access that the bill offers? Protection from discrimination, access to education and training, employment, political life and public life, healthcare and facilities, premises and housing, public passenger vehicles. And you heard earlier that some of these codes are already in draft. I believe there is the education and training, code for employment, and code for healthcare and facilities. So protection from discrimination. The Act treats with this matter, and it specifies that a person with a disability shall not, by reason of such disability, be subject to any form of discrimination. Access to education and training. An educational or training institution is not permitted to deny a person with a disability from being enrolled at or attending the institution by virtue of their disability. The educational or training institution are to provide the support necessary to ensure that a person with a disability has the most reasonable access to the education or training provided and access to the facilities in the least restrictive environment and best suited for his individual needs. The student with a disability is not to be placed at a disadvantage as relates to student services. Reasonable arrangements are to be made, and the support required is to be provided. And the caregiver of a person with a disability is to monitor the circumstances of persons under their care and file a complaint in respect of acts of discrimination with the Jcpd. Educational or training institutions are to have regard to the provisions of the applicable code of practice. Training examinations in relation to licensing or certification, whether for personal or trade purposes, are to be conducted in a place and manner and with facilities accessible to persons with disabilities. And this is important. The Minister of Education is responsible for providing reasonable arrangements within the education system in order to facilitate the education of persons with a disability. Let us look to employment. It is also addressed under the Act, and an employer is prohibited from discriminating against a person with a disability who is otherwise qualified for the job in the terms of employment afforded to that employee, in relation to the opportunities afforded to the employee for promotion, transfer, training, or the receipt of any other benefit, by dismissing him or subjecting him by virtue of his disability to any other detriment without reasonable cause. So the employer is under duty to make reasonable arrangements to prevent disadvantage to the worker. So if the worker cannot, based on the disability, is unable to perform the particular function, then reasonable arrangements ought to be made. Where an employee becomes disabled and is no longer capable of performing the task required by the contract of employment, the employer, is required to redeploy the employee to a new position. This is provided there is no undue or disproportionate burden. The new position should suit the worker's current skill and abilities, and there should be no loss in remuneration and benefits. Political life, political office and public life. A person with a disability is not to be denied the opportunity to participate in programs, activities, or work that relates to political life. And it includes the opportunity to vote using procedures, facilities, materials, and support that are appropriate, accessible, and easy to understand. The opportunity to be elected to political office and perform public functions, and to be involved in the activities and administration of political parties. Persons with disabilities are also not to be denied the opportunity to effectively and fully participate in the conduct of public affairs, including participation in civil society. Healthcare and facilities. Healthcare providers are required to provide healthcare without discrimination on the basis of the person's disability. They are also to provide access to general healthcare services and facilities to persons with disabilities. The minimum standard to be adhered to by healthcare providers are actually set out in the Act in Section 35. The standards include ensuring persons with disabilities have access to the same range and standard of affordable health services as provided to other persons. Persons with disabilities are to be provided with health services required because of their disabilities, including screening, early detection, treatment, and rehabilitation. Premises and housing. Persons with disabilities are to be granted access to premises and housing. A distinction is made under the Act between existing premises and new premises. And the Act also addresses alteration to leased premises. So it speaks to existing premises. The owner or the agent of the owner or the owner's agent of existing private premises who intends to lease or rent the premises is required, if the person with a disability makes a request, to make alteration to the premises to make same accessible to and usable by the person with disability. Alterations are also to be made to public and commercial premises to make same accessible to and usable by a person with a disability as it relates to entrances, bathrooms, telephones, drinking fountains, and emergency exits. However, the duty to make alteration to existing premises will not be applicable where it will make the premises structurally impracticable to meet the requirements of the Act, or to effect the alteration would constitute a disproportionate or undue burden. The Act defined existing premises. Well, it defined the term existing as it relates to premises. And it means those in existence or under construction immediately before the day appointed for the Act to come into effect. Public or commercial premises, so we're talking now about new premises, as it relates to those that are under construction, which are to begin on or after the appointed day are to be constructed in conformity with the following standards. 1, the premises must be readily accessible to and usable by a person with a disability. It must be built in accordance with the National Building Code and designed in such a way as to make the common areas accessible to a person with a disability. Let's just look at alteration of these premises. A person with a disability who leases a premises may make a written request to the lessor, that is the landlord, using the form prescribed, and the disabilities regulations actually sets out those prescribed forms. And these forms are to make the premises to meet, the alteration is to make the premises in a position to meet the requirements of accessibility and usability before they make such alteration. So the tenant or the lessee is required to submit in support of the request a drawing, a plan, diagram or specification that is prepared and signed by a building practitioner who is approved under the Building Act. The landlord has 30 days of receipt of the notice to communicate his or her consent or refusal in writing, and the landlord is to communicate his consent or refusal using the form that is outlined in the disabilities regulations. Their consent cannot be withheld unreasonably. All right, so let us fast forward a bit. There's something that is important to the modification. Modification of a premises is to be done within 24 months after the act comes into force. And the act will be coming into force on the 14th of February. So that's the appointed day. So any modification of existing premises is to be made commencing the date of the 14th of February 2022. As it relates to commercial premises, as it relates to premises under construction, it is within 24 months of, if I said day, I'm sorry, it is 24 months. It is 24 months from the date of the 14th of February 2022, or when the construction completes, whichever is earlier. I think I have a little time constraint, so I'll jump to public passenger vehicle.
Yes, can we talk about it?
The Minister of Transport is responsible for ensuring that public passenger vehicles are accessible to and usable by persons with disability. And the term public passenger vehicle are defined widely to encompass transport by road, rail, air, and water. So this is important, the mechanism for complaint. A person with a disability or his or her caregiver who is affected by an act of discrimination may make a complaint to the Jcpd. And the grounds on which a complaint can be made are: 1, there's an act of discrimination carried out against a person with a disability. There's a failure by the respondent in the complaint to comply with the codes of practice, or there are breaches to the act. And the complaint is to be made in writing, and it is to be brought within 2 years from the date of the occurrence. And please note the date. It is time sensitive, because if you miss the date, then you have lost your opportunity for redress. And the Jcpd is to refer the complaint to the tribunal or to alternative dispute resolution with the consent of the parties. Of course, in the regulation, it speaks to the registration of persons with disabilities. It actually sets out what is supposed to happen. So it starts with a registration application, which must be accompanied by an eligibility report, and that report is to be signed by a registered medical practitioner or a specialist who is trained in diagnosing or treating the disability concerned. And the council is to review the application within 30 days after receiving same, or such time as is reasonably practicable where it is impractical to review in the specified time. The council is to issue a certificate of registration in the name of the person with a disability once they are satisfied that the person on whose behalf the application is made is a person with a disability. And that certificate is valid for 5 years unless it is revoked or upon death of the person with a disability. The council, if it is not satisfied that the person whose name the application is made is a person with a disability, they are authorized to refuse to approve the application. And the refusal must be in writing, and they are to give reasons for the decision to refuse. They are to notify the applicant within 14 days after taking the decision. Of course, in every application, if the certificate is valid for 5 years, it means that it has to be renewed. So application for renewal is to be submitted to the council not less than 60 days before the expiration of the certificate and not more than 6 months after the certificate expires. And if the application is not made within the time frame, then the applicant is required to make a new application for registration. And recall earlier I said new application means you submit an application form and an eligibility report. Here, if you meet the time frame, then all you're doing is submitting an application. There's no need for an eligibility report. Of course, if the person with disability is diagnosed with a new disability, then the application needs to give details of the new disabilities. The council is to review the application within 30 days of receiving the application, and upon, of course, approving the application, issue a certificate once they are satisfied. There is a power to revoke, but I want to take you to the review of decisions. The applicant may apply to the minister to review the following decision if the application for registration is refused, for failing to renew or to revoke the application. And this application is to be brought by the caregiver or the person with a disability, whoever that applicant is. And the application is to be supported by reasons the applicant believes the application should not be refused, renewed, or it should be renewed or not revoked. And of course, the application is to be made within 21 days of serving the notice of the refusal. A panel will be determined by the minister. The legislation sets out who the panel members are to be, and they are to review the decision of the council within 60 days after the minister receives the application. And of course, if the decision is that they are to be registered or that the application should be renewed or not revoked, then the council must implement the instructions or the findings. All right. So there are more, but at this stage, there are offenses under the Act. They're all set out in the Act. And I will leave it there. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Mrs. Janetta Smikle, Senior Legal Officer. Certainly, one thing, and I do want to make it very clear, it's persons with disabilities, not persons living with, but persons with disabilities. We understand that whenever it comes to legal, it's always extremely comprehensive. So what I did realize is the collaborative approach and the fact that whenever a person's human rights is infringed upon, it affects so many different facets. So I realized that we had the Ministry of Education that is also there, the Ministry of Transportation, because we look at all of those areas that are touch points for our persons with disabilities. For the persons, we know that she could not go through everything. So what I would invite you to do, and it is just a simple Google. We Google random things that really not benefit us any time at all. So just take the time, take 5 minutes, Google Disability Act in Jamaica. And what you should see is the website jcpdja.com. It pops up. It has information there. jis.gov.jm also has information. So if there's any part of the act, of course, that Mrs. Smike was not able to speak about or expound upon because of time constraint, take it upon yourself to go and find the information for yourself. Thank you so very much. I absolutely love the part with the transportation and education. My daughter is 9, and she often asks, why is it that she does not see other children who have disabilities but are perfectly fine in terms of they don't have any learning disabilities? Why doesn't she see them at her school? And she wants to know why she doesn't see children in wheelchairs at her school. And so once we start having children at her age questioning and challenging and advocating, then I think we will be an inclusive society. So I thank you again, Mrs. Michael, for taking us through that. Now, we heard from Miss Williams earlier on. She sang for us Strive, part of the Jcpd family, and she's also visually impaired. And so we are having another item, and I'd like to invite Sirs Robert Lawson, who assisted us with the acoustic guitar earlier, and Lenworth Duffus, who will be giving us Christmas JA. I understand that this duo are musicians by trade. One visually impaired, the other completely blind, and together they are magic. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Sirs Lawson and Duffus. Christmas JA.
We don't have no snow, we don't have no sleighs, but fun we do have at Christmas Day. So run and come to see and sun, it's Christmas Day. Snow and sleet, we never meet at Christmas Day. Are nice, much nicer than ice. The rum is still fine, and so is the wine. So run and come to see and sun, it's Christmas Day. Snow and sleet, we never meet at Christmas Day. Come one and all, and let's have a ball. Jamaicans, you see, at Christmas love spree. So run and come to see and sun, it's Christmas Day. Snow and sleet, we never meet at Christmas Day. So run and come to see and sun, it's Christmas Day. Snow and sleet, we never meet at Christmas Day.
Woo! Now so I understand that Mr. Lawson plays the guitar. That would leave me with Lenworth Duffus, who plays the recorder, right? Now, how many of us went to school and learned on the recorder? How many of us learned to play more than 2 songs on the recorder? Not one of us. I have always wondered how come in music we always learn about the recorder, but you never ever go to functions and actually see people using the recorder. That was absolutely beautiful, man. And I see questions coming in on Zoom, and we invite everyone to ask your questions. We do have a question and answer segment, but I think it's important for us to highlight individuals with disabilities, because a lot of the times people believe that they can't do anything. And I know blind and brilliant. I know dexterous and deaf. I know persons bound by wheelchairs, but they have winning personalities and attitudes. And so what we also do is we invite private sector, public sector, when they're putting together their events, to consider other persons, artisans, craftsmen, and of course musicians who are within that community who can still deliver a fantastic service. One more time for Sirs Robert Lawson and Lenworth Duffus. I prefer the beaches to the ice as well. You hear, guys? That was a great, great, great song selection. So we heard the legal part, and I mean, we do have a question, but I think I'm going to leave it for the question and answer segment. But please give us your questions so that as soon as we hit our question and answer segment, we can hit the ground running. So we heard the legal aspect of the Disabilities Act. However, we would like to know, understand, what does this mean in terms of workplace inclusion? And I want to acknowledge the Digicel Foundation. Certainly, they have been the epitome in terms of companies that believe in inclusion and hire persons with disabilities. I invite Dr. Christine Hendricks, Executive Director, Jcpd, presenting the Disabilities Act Workplace Inclusion. Please put your hands together.
Okay, so good morning to my viewers and to my radio listeners and persons in studio with us. Because we have so little time left, I will run ahead and continue the conversation looking at the Disabilities Act as it pertains to inclusion in the workplace. So I'll run straight to the context, to the fact that the National Labor Market Survey Guide to Employment Opportunities in Jamaica in 2017 states that 68% of respondents to this survey confirmed that their companies did not have anyone employed that had a disability. 56% of respondents stated that they had no established policies to facilitate persons with disabilities. And 60% said that there was no policy to facilitate persons who had acquired a disability throughout the course of their employment. So the Disabilities Act, you would have heard earlier, covers the fact that the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities is to develop codes of practice. And these, as you already heard, are guidance. These codes will provide guidance on matters under the Act, which are practical guidelines for the avoidance of discrimination on the grounds of a person's disability. Now, there were some terms that were defined earlier, and I'll just make reference to them and run along in the conversation. And the terms, one of them is access. And access broadly refers to premises, benefits, and of course, communication, as you heard before. Now, accessible features that we expect to see and continue to improve includes rails, ramps, lifts, lowered tables, and signage to ensure that persons are able to read and to see and to be directed appropriately when they enter a building. And these are used to assist persons with disabilities in their daily movements and activities. Accessibility aids refer to braille, hearing aids, canes, crutches, wheelchairs, technology devices which are used to support persons with disabilities. We spoke about communicate and the various types of communication in terms of how we make use of language. And it speaks to text, it speaks to multimedia, it speaks to human reader, it speaks to other modes of communication, tactile, and other means of communication to ensure that the person with the varying disabilities are able to understand and communicate with their environment and with individuals. So an employer shall not discriminate a person with a disability who is otherwise qualified for employment. And you heard that earlier by our legal representative. And because the public sector is a very critical employer, it is important to just recap some of the areas that were mentioned under this clause. So the employer shall not discriminate against a person with a disability who is otherwise qualified for employment in terms of the employment afforded to that employee, in relation to the opportunities afforded for transfer, promotion, training, or the receipt of any other benefit, or dismissing someone without reasonable cause just because the individual acquires a disability or has a disability. To ensure workplace inclusion, there are three concepts that we're going to be examining. The Disabilities Act in Section 29 outlines these areas: non-discrimination, reasonable arrangements, and redeployment. Now, non-discrimination was defined broadly, but I'll just say that it is when you distinguish or exclude or restrict an individual because they have a disability, and it refers to all facets of life. In terms of the reasonable arrangements, it is the modification or the adjustments, not imposing a disproportionate or undue burden to enable the person with disability to function effectively in society. And we spoke about those: the equipments, the interpreters, the readers, and so on. Now, workplace inclusion begins with disability management. And disability management is just the way that we determine to manage disability issues in the workplace. So the onus is on employers to include strategies for managing disabilities, because that is an integral part of the overall employment policy, and it should be if it is not yet. So this process should first be implemented as part of the human resource development strategy. So our human resource personnel in the varying ministries, this is very, very important. Disability management strategy as part of the development of your human resource. There is also a need for social integration and campaigning for disability employment. So as awareness grows, training sessions on the rights of persons with disabilities is very important, because persons with disabilities need to have access to safe and decent work. And we also need to be lobbying for and ensure that there are improvements in how persons with disabilities access education and training to ensure that we're producing qualified and competent candidates for the Jamaican workforce. This is essential for employers to ensure that you expand your pool of talents and skills. Accessibility. In terms of employing persons with disabilities, employers need to take the necessary steps to provide reasonable arrangements in respect of accessibility to and at the workplace. For example, persons who use wheelchairs, there's need for access, and not just a ramp that is a slope. And right, so the standard is very, very important. The technology that is required, health insurance is important, and not leaving the person with a disability out of that. In terms of recruitment and hiring, workplace recruitment programs need to, or persons who create workplace recruitment programs need to ensure that they forge relationships with different organizations, schools, training institutions, companies that support persons with disabilities to assist with the recruitment process. In terms of posting job advertisements, ensure that when we post the job descriptions in manners that it is accessible to all persons with disabilities. In terms of the interview process, the HR managers have the responsibility to select qualified staff irrespective of the disability and ensure that there's reasonable arrangements to accommodate these persons. And the process should begin from the shortlisting of interviewees, the preparation for interview, and the interview questions. So the interview questions should not be focusing necessarily about the disability and, Lord, how you're managing. No, if it is about the disability in terms of how you will perform the job, then we're good to go. In terms of retaining and advancing employees, studies have shown that employers and employees both benefit from a work environment that facilitates the retention of all skilled, qualified workers through effective job accommodation for employees with disabilities. An employer should provide equal access to career development, training and advancement opportunities for employees with disabilities. And so it's important that if you hire someone with a disability at a lower level, allow them the opportunity to advance in their career, help them to develop and to move forward in their own career so that they can benefit society as they, improve themselves. And the person with disability who acquires the disability on the job should be redeployed and retained, as we heard earlier. In terms of dismissal, an employer should not dismiss or fire that employee because of their status. However, the employer would not be deemed to be discriminating if the circumstances of dismissal was justifiable and if the dismissal could not be avoided under the circumstance. Now, as we speak about reasonable arrangements, there's a concept that the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and by extension, the Disability Act, promotes. And it is the concept of universal design. Now, universal design is the process of designing an environment so that it is accessed, understood, and used by all people regardless of their age, their size, their ability, or their disability. When universal design principles are applied, products and environments meet the needs of potential users with a wide variety of characteristics. And disability is just one of those characteristics that an individual might possess. Now, what is the relevance of universal design to the public sector? For example, a typical service counter in a usual place of business, and our public sector is a place of business, is not accessible to everyone, including those who are of short stature, those who use wheelchairs, and those who cannot stand for extended periods of time. And you see the picture there of the service counter that is one level, and it is high. Applying the universal design principles might result in the design of a counter with multiple heights. So there is a standard height designed for individuals with the average height, and or those who prefer to stand up. And it also accommodates persons who are shorter, those who prefer to sit on a chair to talk with the service staff, or those who use wheelchairs for their mobility. And we see the picture there of the multiple designed counter, standard height and the lower level height. So our public sector partners and stakeholders need to ensure that there is an inclusive policy that ensures inclusion of matters relating to persons with disabilities. Ensure that you include disability sensitization as part of your orientation process and in your training manuals. Ensure that there is capacity building on the current trends in disability. And make sure that when you're sitting at your table to create your policies and programs, make sure that there's a knowledgeable person with disability represented at that table to provide guidance or whatever is needed. So there is an accessibility checklist that the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disability has, which is also on our website. And this checklist can help you to journey to check and audit your space for accessibility. And it takes you from the parking lot, inside, signage, looking at the varying levels, looking at your entrances and your reception areas, right down to your sanitary accommodation, to your means of escape and your building management. There will be accessibility audits provided by the Jcpd and other disability partners in the new dispensation, and we look forward to hearing and receiving those requests. In terms of reasonable arrangements, you will notice that the parking lots for persons with disabilities must have the universal access sign to differentiate it from a regular parking space. You will also note that that parking space is not the same as the regular vehicle. It is about a size and a half or a space and a half for the person with a disability in the motor vehicle. There is also the entrance into the building that has steps, but it also has right beside it a ramp that will allow for access. There is a signage with that picture with the hands to show that sign language is available in that space. You will notice the doors. It is not the round doorknob, but rather the doorknob with the door with the handle to allow persons, whether you have a hand or not, you can assist yourself. And in terms of the furniture and equipment in the office, ensure that while persons can access it, those who have regular height and can stand, if I move around in a wheelchair, I can also access that device or equipment independently. In conclusion, making a product or an environment accessible to persons with disabilities often benefits others. For example, automatic door openers benefit individuals using walkers and wheelchairs, but it also benefits people carrying groceries, holding babies, as well as elderly citizens. Sidewalk curb cuts designed to make sidewalks and streets accessible to those using wheelchairs are often more used by children on skateboards, parents with strollers, and delivery staff with carts. When a television displayed in airports and restaurants are captioned, the programming is not only accessible to people who are deaf, but it also facilitates others who can't hear the audio because the environment is noisy. So universal design is a goal that puts high values on diversity, equality, and inclusiveness. And we also understand that it is a process. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Hendricks. She has such a beautiful voice, doesn't she? Like a broadcaster, like she could just do this for Raid. And I'm just saying that if you have time on your schedule, you could totally. I think that there could be multiple incomes here. I mean, thank you so very much for ably walking us through in such a manner that was digestible and everyone could understand. And for many of us, it seemed like, but these are normal. No, there are actually parking spaces that are made available for this particular community. And yet still, I have to cuss and go on very bad. Do not tell my grandmother, because persons who are not in need of that parking space parks in those spaces. And so what we really need to do for those of us who know better is to also advocate for the persons who are not there. Therefore, sometimes it requires us telling somebody, yo, chief, you can't park there, you know. Oh, I only stay in 3 minutes. Well, 3 minutes for you can be 3 hours to somebody with a disability. And so we really have to do the introspection. And it just reminds us too that we have our unconscious and conscious biases. We've grown forever with the world catering to us. We are the center of the entire universe. But not once do we stop to think about others who need other things that maybe we don't need. And it's okay. It's not always going to be about us. In fact, it should be more inclusive. And I think when I met Dr. Hendricks at an event that was being held by the Digital Foundation, speaking about this very, very topic, I explained, or I gave the story of going to Singapore, which is one of my favorite countries to visit. And while visiting a particular a business place that is very big on inclusion. And I asked them about design, going back to universal design. What she said is that Singapore, not just as a culture, or not just as a business acumen, but as a culture, they believe that when you are going to design, you actually design for the person who is the weakest in the community, in the country. So they do not design thinking about the person who has it all, sight, hearing, hands, feet. No, they look for the person who has possibly 3 or 4 disabilities all at once. And then they design for that person, understanding that if you can cater to this person, then everybody else will benefit. Yes. And honestly, if we're going to be a country that wants to be the hub of the region, blah, 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 we cannot do this unless we're going to start thinking this way. Thank you so very much for that. So we're going to take the questions. I have a question here, I think, from Zoom. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns or maybe input that you want to add, please go ahead and submit it there in the chat or comment section. First question, what are the penalties? That's a very good question. What are the penalties under the legislation if an employer discriminates against the employee? And I'm going to hand it right over to our legal advisor.
So recall that we were speaking about the Disabilities Rights Tribunal. So if it is that the employer discriminates against a person with a disability, then the complaint should be lodged with the council, that's the Jcpd, and thereafter sent to the tribunal to be settled. So the settlement stage starts there, and there are many. I had listed 3, I believe: a declaration, or basically to tell the employer what they are to do to fix the breach. Yes, so those are ways to fix it. But if it is that having issued this order, that is the tribunal issued the order, the employer continues to disobey, then the tribunal can actually take the person to the Supreme Court, and the court, there's a fine if it is that their persons, of course, is convicted and it is shown that they have disobeyed the order, which goes up to $1 million.
$1 million. Well, you know, that was going to be my question. I was going to ask if it's one of those things where the penalty is like a little 2 pence, therefore persons feel like that is nothing and they just pay it and they just continue. But certainly they understand that it could be a big dent in their pockets. Certainly it would.
But the act also goes on a little further, because the managers, directors, they themselves could be personally responsible, and individual, they could be fined $500,000.
I like it. I like it. No, because, I mean, it is unfortunate that we actually have to have our Disability Act in the first place. It's unfortunate, but certainly we don't want people to feel as if they can just pay this little bit of money and continue to breach the human rights. So that is actually something that's very important. And again, for persons who are just joining us, maybe you joined late, maybe you missed the presentation that really gave us an idea of the legal aspects, please, we ask you to visit the website jcpdja.com as well as jis.gov.jm, just so that you can educate yourself about the Disabilities Act. Now, the next question I have here, what is the level of sensitization being done to promote awareness of the Disability Act? We understand it's not an overnight thing. We know that it can't be all done all the time. So how do we plan on, I guess, marching this out in a way that everyone understands and can benefit?
So you will note that we have begun, and it's not just today, but over time, we have been doing sensitization with varying groups. And so this week, Disabilities Awareness Week, was one of those times when we took the varying stakeholders at different levels to go through the act so that they know their roles and their responsibilities. And so the public sector being here today, this is one of the sensitizations. We should also note that members of the public sector were also part of the drafting of the act, because they had to review the different ministries, agencies, and departments to ensure that we were not conflicting each other in terms of what is there. And so there have been levels of awareness over time. There will also be a consultant, a communication consultant brought on board to flesh out the areas of the Disabilities Act, disability matters, so that the public understands in varying circumstances. So there will be media, social media, and, you know, varying means of making the public aware.
And there's also the training, the very targeted training for companies that really want to do better, but you may not know. We understand that you're out in the ocean drowning and you don't know what's going on. There is a life vest, and all you have to do is reach out and ask. That is why we have these training facilities.
And not only that, we will have the codes of practice as well that will provide guidance. So persons will not be left on their own to figure out how I do not discriminate. So the codes of practice for education and training, employment, healthcare and health facilities, transportation, and others will be there to outline, provide the guidelines step by step as to how not to discriminate.
Fantastic. Sounds very good. I know that we're taking questions online, but we also have questions right here on the floor. And I welcome Lenworth Duffus, one of our entertainers earlier, who has a question. Go right ahead, Sir Duffus.
Okay, my question is this. In the terms of public transportation, the buses, for one, there are only 4 seats for persons with disability. But at times when we get on the bus, persons are in it, and soon as they say we come up, they say, well, I now get up on that seat, you know, because I come here first. And we have to find somewhere else to go. And there's one other thing. One day I was walking in Spanish Town, and I don't know how my foot got down into a cow trap or one of those drain things and cut my foot. My Roberto walking and took out my foot and he get a cut by it. I don't know. That's it.
Okay, thank you. He brings to the point, and again, some of us don't have to think about this. Some of us jump in our cars and we go about our business. But we saw where the Ministry of Transportation, there was some legal, language around transportation. But then how do we enforce it, especially when we have so many routes, so many buses, so many taxis, and we have these persons who now get there. They get in these places that are these particular service providers, but then they're confronted with what I call a part of the ugly culture that we have, where we are not empathetic or understanding. How do we now treat that, where he may not be able to necessarily file a complaint because he doesn't even know who this person is? How do we even navigate? And that's a very hard question, I know. But how do we even begin to navigate things like hurting ourselves if we're on the sidewalk? Who does he go to? How does he file a complaint where that is concerned?
So the act binds the crown.
That's right.
That's very important. So the government also has to comply with the act. This means that the complaint that is made can be made to the council against the government because the government has failed. There is going to be a code of practice, I believe. And if the government breaches the code of practice, that too is subject to a complaint that can be lodged with the council and determined by the tribunal.
You hear that, Mr. Duffus? So, Mr. Duffus, that means, say, if you hurt yourself at all, you have a right. You have persons and systems put in place that you can come and you can air your grievance. And it is now going to be the government's responsibility to ensure that what happens to you will not happen to someone else. And so it means that your voice matters even more now than it ever did before. And as long as members of the community like yourself speak up bravely for others who may not be in a position to, it means that we can make the place much safer for them. So you have a space that you can actually go legally to ensure that that does not happen to someone else. And I'm really sorry that you have to experience that.
But let me say, though, that this is after the act comes into effect in February. And you have 2 years after the occurrence of the incident to report.
Right, I remember you said that. You, Mr. Duffus, you wanted to add something else? February 14. Right, so February 14. So, you're not going to see me wearing red and white for any other reason. I'm going to be celebrating February 14, not because of Valentine's Day, but because the act is not going to come into effect. And it means that all of us have a right to question and to challenge and to advocate for persons who are not in the room with us. If you're not doing that, then you will be a part of the problem. The next question I have, for people who were certified as disabled years ago, would they now have to renew their certification when the Disabilities Act comes into effect in February? Good question.
So the legislation also contemplated that. But if you remember, it is a new entity. And so persons who are already registered with the Ministry of Labour, they are deemed to be a person with a disability. They have to also register with the council. The difference is all they will be doing is just bringing an application to the council for their name to be recorded in the confidential register. So they would not have to go from square one where you're applying an eligibility report and that those information, the person would just need to fill out a
It's
form.
additional.
Yes, that is outlined in the regulations, and the council will deem them to be a person of disability.
All right. The next question I have here, are there any other stakeholders that are on board with the enactment of the regulation? And I suppose, because I do understand that, you're not acting alone and there are many different partners, bodies, entities that help to support that which you are doing. So what are they?
Okay, so we already heard earlier from UNICEF. So UNICEF is on board. We have persons like Digicel. We have support from other international partners, the PSOJ, and other partners and stakeholders aside from persons with disabilities and communities of persons with disabilities. Ministries, departments, and agencies are also our partners, the PIOJ, Statin, and so on. Yes.
And thank you for that. And I mean, it would behoove me to also mention that, even in this space, as we speak about these different entities, there's also the Jamaica Association to the Deaf, which is JAD or JAD, Jamaica Society for the Blind, JSB. And if you've ever gone to the one on Old Hope Road, there is Superior Craft, a community right there. They are blind. Some are visually impaired, but the ones who actually weave the most beautiful bags and baskets and chairs. Listen, the best is Superior Craft right there. So, of course, if you're looking for Christmas gifts as well, go down there and see what you can do just to keep their livelihood going. And I mean, shout out to Toyota Jamaica. They actually just outfitted Superior Craft with a brand new workroom to give them enough space to do their craft. Jamaican Association on Intellectual Disabilities, Jamaica Autism Support Association, Combined Disabilities Association, Community-Based Rehabilitation Jamaica, as well as Salvation Army School for the Blind, that are all working together to try to protect and to promote the rights of persons with disabilities. So are there any... I have a question from the floor. How are you? Welcome.
Great, thank you. Good day, everyone.
Hello.
I would like to express the appreciation for the codes of practice, because I think it's very important to have guidelines, especially given that the regulations have not been enacted as yet.
They are.
Well,
it comes
the
into
act-
The
effect
regulation
February.
has
Act
been
is-
affirmed
It has been affirmed.
October this year, yes.
Okay. So I noted in your presentation there was a 24-month timeline for
Modification of
Buildings.
premises.
modification of buildings, etc. I was wondering what exactly stirred that 24-month timeline, given the situation in Jamaica, where we know how construction
Building
and
a boom.
infrastructure and everything, the applications process, etc. Is that a reasonable timeline, and will there be some leniency, especially even for public sector? We know that a lot of the government agencies are in rented buildings. They don't own the buildings. How will that impact the implementation of the regulations or the act?
So the
And
act...
my final
sorry.
question, my final question is there a timeline for when the JCPD will become a corporate body? Because I don't recall hearing that, because right now it's a department, and then they have powers when they become corporate, and then they will be responsible for so many things. So how will those timelines really flow? Thank you.
Starting with your last question first. The JCPD will be implemented in the 14th of February. They becomes operational because they're already, there is already powers for their establishment, so work is ongoing to actually implement the operations of the new JCPD. As it relates to the 24 months, no, there will be no extension of time. It's a transitional period. The Act was passed since 2014, and the Act it was stated in the Act, and it is stated in the Act, that there is 24 months from the day the Act comes into effect. And I want to believe that is why the minister set his appointment date until February, so that you have a little more time to get our houses in order. But no, it's 24 months from the appointed day. So after that time expires, then everybody has to be in compliance.
So I think maybe we should that's for existing buildings, but
Oh.
buildings that are being constructed now have to take consideration of ensuring that there is access. So all the buildings that are going up now, it would behoove them to ensure that it is accessible.
And as it relates to buildings that are the 24 months, for those that are in construction, it has to be at the end of construction or 24 months from July 14, whichever is earlier. And note what the legislation
February.
says.
February.
Oh, February,
February.
sorry. Whichever is earlier. So there is no long period of time to say, oh, we have not completed construction. No. It's the longest period you really have is 24 months. Or if construction ends before 24 months expires, then it would be when the construction ends.
All right, thank you. The next question that we have here, very good question. Are people with disabilities able to bring, for example, wheelchairs into the country without paying duty fees? Or even if they're not doing it themselves, what about other entities or other persons who may want to send wheelchairs? How does that happen? Are they exempted of those duty?
My understanding from the Ministry of Finance is that you don't pay duty on devices for access or accessible devices.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Any more questions from the floor? You had a question? She said, no, I didn't. I'm just making sure that I have one more question from the floor, and then I'm going to wrap, and certainly I invite you guys to continue the questions. The questions can continue to come in on the YouTube page of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, as well as Instagram, Jcpd's Instagram page. Your question.
Okay, hi, I'm very heartened
Hello.
by the step in the right direction for Jamaica.
You're here.
I'm a little concerned, though, about the future of work and the advancement in technology, which appears to be leaving behind persons. Even some of us will be left behind, much more those with disability. I don't know if some consideration has been given to looking at some of those issues. And I give you an example. My ministry purchased a new PBX system. The one before allowed for the persons with disability to use the Braille. The new ones cannot utilize Braille. And so these are some of the factors that I don't know if consideration has been given to. And also we spoke about enforcement and penalties and so on. We want champions. We don't want it to get to persons making a complaint to do something about that. And I do trust that the new JCPD has been empowered with the proper capacity for not just enforcement, but for proper change management, because we're speaking about a change in culture. This is a cultural change. And also with the advent of COVID, some of us barely have a budget for salaries, much more to modify buildings and so on. It's not that there's no interest, but as I said, there's need for a proper enabling environment also to support what we're looking at, for us to be very realistic. So those are two questions. Those are my two questions. One about the major advancement in technology that really seem to be leaving behind a lot of these persons, and the other has to do with that enabling framework and having champions. So somebody on the bus is a designated champion saying, no, you can't do that. Or that, with the advent of social media, somebody flips out a phone. So because somebody will flip out a phone when you're taking somebody of disabled parking,
you're less likely.
You don't do it. So you want that kind of support also, not just the formal enforcement, but also champions and so on. Those are my questions.
In terms of the technology, I might not know the specifics about the PBMX system, but I know that modern technology takes a universal design approach. Take, for example, the new cell phones, the Apple phone. The Apple phone can describe you down to the T for the person who is blind. and also guide them along the way. Our technology developers are already into universal design and understands universal design, because recall, we are not necessarily designing a society specifically for persons with disabilities, but we're designing for varying users. And so the technology, except I don't know about the PBMX, I know that the technology considers universal design. In terms of the enabling environment and champions, I'm sure the new Jcpd, that's on their agenda.
It has to be. It
Yes.
definitely it has to be, and I'm there with you in terms of
Yes.
for advocacy. So I know that this is the kind of conversation that could absolutely go on, but certainly because of time constraint, we're going to have to bring the question and answer segment to the end. But we certainly have learned, and this is a start. We understand that Rome was not built in a day, but we all have to hold each other accountable. Okay, I do have 2 prizes, and I'm going to have one. We have so many questions, but hopefully what we'll be able to do, those questions that came in, we'll be able to provide those answers via the social media platforms, just so that people can get a great idea of the scope of this conversation. So the very first question, I'm going to give one question to the online community and one question to the floor, okay? The first question I'm going to give to the online community. When was the Disability Act passed? I want the date. I want the month. I want the day. I hear Duffus and I hear lots of say, thank God we never get the questions on the floor. Online, when was the Disability Act passed? I want the month, I want the day, and I want the year. And for persons on the floor, the question is, and you can't shout after me, you have to put up your hand like we're in a class here. What is the effective day for the Disabilities Act? Are you allowed to answer? I don't think you're
Yes.
allowed. Okay, she's allowed to answer. Okay, go right ahead. Hold on, wait for the mic.
February 14th, 2022.
Absolutely. What is the
Do I get a
effective
prize?
day for the Disabilities Act? February 14, 2022. Congratulations. I have one basket here, and of course I have another basket or gift, I believe. I'm waiting to see who will be the winner of that question. When was the Disability Act actually passed? I need the full date. And even if we are no longer broadcasting live, when the person actually comes in with the answer, don't worry, a staff member will actually contact you to ensure that you get your winnings. Okay, so I wish you all the best with the answer. I certainly hope that you have enjoyed it. We have a winner, and I'm waiting for the name to come up for me. Dion Shaw, congratulations. July 22, 2014 was when the Disability Act was actually passed. Congratulations, Diane Shaw. You'll hear from someone just to arrange pick up for your prize. So at this time, I'm going to invite a lovely lady who was here earlier. She gave us the official opening and the welcome, and she is now going to come back to do the vote of thanks and closing remarks. Kindly welcome Mrs. Dion Jennings. Dion was the winner. Dion Shaw. Now we have Dion Jennings, Chief Technical Director. Over to you.
Congratulations to our winners. And thank you so much, Madam Moderator, for moderating the session so ably.
Thank
so
you.
well.
Thank
and
you.
so gracefully too.
Thank you.
Thank you. So on behalf of the team here, the Ministry of Labour and Social Security and the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, I really want to say thanks to all the persons who are here in studio and those who are online, senior executives of the public sector. We know your role is great and your responsibility is great. And you also have a key role in advising the ministers, the directors, the staff, in terms of policies and plans and programs. And we know that your learning here today will enable you to embed the rights of persons with disabilities in all that you do. Yes. And so we recognize that we need that cultural change. But we have online and in this room some
champions.
Change champions. We are the change and we will be the change. Can I close on that?
Absolutely. Drop mic.
Wonderful.
Wow.
And so I want to thank Mario from Unicef, who gave greetings earlier, Vanda Palmer, who brought greetings on behalf of our minister, our presenters. They did very well. Mrs. Janetta Smichael and Dr. Christine Hendricks from the ministry and JCPD. And we want to thank them for ensuring that we have so much more than we did not know before to walk with, to share, to digest, and to ensure that we can implement in everything we do to protect and promote the rights of persons with disabilities in this country. So on February 14, 2022, what are we going to do? We're going to celebrate with persons with disabilities because the Disabilities Act will come into effect. So thank you so much for your participation. And we have a gift for you, Dr. Carell.
For me?
Yes.
To hand out to them?
No.
For me?
We have a gift for you. And we also want to thank the sponsor, Digicel, for giving us Terry Carell today. So thank you, Digicel, and thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you. I'm so accustomed to just, running a program that when people say there's a gift for me, I actually think it's to now hand over to somebody else. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a gift here from the Assessment and Guidance Center,
Yes.
an arm of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. So this was created by persons with disabilities.
It means a lot. And I'm going to tell you why it means a lot, because this particular area, which is persons with disabilities, is an area that is extremely near and dear to my heart. To the point that sometimes even when I'm hosting events, depending on the nature of the event, I will always ask persons if it's ICT or if it's persons graduating out of UA or UTech, I always ask them to use their ability, not to just think about applications that are for the environment, but to also think about applications that can serve the community. And certainly, although I would love my daughter to be the brightest of the bright, it is more important for me that she is empathetic and that she is conscious, so much so I'm going to pluck her out of school. Hi, Miss McDonald, love you. Because we're actually going to do something with regards to mobility and persons with disabilities. And so this means a lot to me, and it would probably be one of the most meaningful gifts that I have to date. So thank you very much. I soon come and collect it, but because I'm going to throw. Thank you so very much. Another round of applause. Thank you so very much. Again, to the persons, if you listen to the national pledge, before God and all mankind, we pledge this love and loyalty. We cannot truly mean it if we are not considering all of our citizens. And so when next you hear someone give a joke or misrepresent a person of this community, it is not something for us to kiki and laugh at. Actually, it is something, it's a time where you say that's not cool and that's not funny, because in that sense you become that change maker. If you are a youth leader and you're getting audience with persons who are giving you a listening ear, ensure that you grab a youth leader who is also a member of the community, because they have perspective that you will never have and you will never understand. And again, be the voice for those persons who are not in the room. So even though we are celebrating International Day for Persons with Disabilities, I certainly hope that it is a day that we will celebrate 365 and a quarter days, as if it's still a quarter. I'm a common entrance baby. So I learned it as 365 and a quarter days. Congratulations to JCPD. Thank you so very much to the Ministry, to Digicel Foundation, and all the agencies and entities and private companies who continue to be the example. Hopefully we can celebrate Jamaica as being a leader when it comes to promoting and protecting the rights of our most vulnerable communities. I am Dr. Terry Carell Reid. It was a pleasure serving you in the capacity of host. Do take care.